Singapore has designated part of its downtown as a special event area for the span of 5 days. The South Korean government is to review the possibility of endorsing the revised minimum wage law following alarming data that show the wage hikes are actually harming the employment market. In Guatemala, at least 62 people have died in the worst volcanic eruption to hit the Central American nation in a century. The death toll is expected to rise. The date had been set, and now the exact time is out. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump will have their first meeting on June 12th at 9 a.m. local time in Singapore. The summit's host, Singapore, has designated the central part of the city as a special event area for the upcoming talks. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
The date for the historic Pyongyang-Washington summit, June 12th, has been set for some time now. But we got some more details from the White House on Monday. It says the summit will begin next Tuesday at 9 a.m. Singapore time. That's 10 a.m. in Korea.
And I can also tell you the schedule for tentatively for that first meeting will be on June 12th at 9 a.m. Singapore time and take place June 11th, 9 p.m. East Coast time.
With the timing arranged, there's still the question of the summit location. The Singapore government has declared the area surrounding the Shangri-La Hotel a special event area for the period of June 10th to the 14th for the upcoming summit. Observers say this could mean a number of things. It could mean the Shangri-La Hotel is the summit location. It could also be where one of the leaders will be staying, or could even be a decoy for security purposes. The Capella Hotel on Sentosa has also been mentioned as either the summit location or where Kim or Trump may stay. However, watchers say the Shangri-La Hotel may be the favorite location as it has held major conferences over the years, including numerous ASEAN summits, and has also hosted U.S. presidents before, including Barack Obama and George H.W. Bush. As the two sides look to resolve their differences through diplomacy, the White House has clarified that the Trump administration's policy of maximum pressure through sanctions remains in place and will stay until the regime has abandoned its nuclear weapons.
Our policy hasn't changed, and as the president stated, we have sanctions on. They're very powerful, and we would not take those sanctions off unless North Korea denuclearized.
The White House was clearing up remarks made last week by President Trump following his meeting with a senior North Korean envoy. Trump said he didn't want to use the term maximum pressure anymore to describe U.S. pressure on Pyongyang. He also said he looks forward to the day when he could take the sanctions off the regime. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The UN's nuclear watchdog has stressed that it's ready to resume operations to inspect and verify the process of North Korea's denuclearization. At a press conference in Vienna on Monday, IAEA Chief Yukiya Amano said the agency is keeping a close eye on recent developments surrounding Pyongyang's nuclear program. He also added that the agency will be able to resume its operations within North Korea in a matter of weeks once a political agreement is struck among the relevant parties and a board of authorization is given. The IAEA inspectors were expelled from North Korea in 2009. The U.S. might be willing to show some flexibility to North Korea in some areas, but when it comes to other things, the policy remains firm and unwavering. Downplaying speculations to the contrary, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis has reaffirmed that American soldiers will remain deployed in South Korea. Speaking to reporters on a flight back to the U.S. from a security conference in Singapore, Mattis flatly ruled out of the possibility of withdrawing any of the 28,000 U.S. troops stationed in the South. Now, just a day before Mattis said the issue won't be on the negotiating table at the June 12th Singapore summit. Mattis added that North Korea was the topic of almost all his conversations during his meeting in Singapore. Russian President Vladimir Putin has invited North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to Russia in September. Now, this is according to Moscow-based RIA news agency, citing Russia's deputy speaker of the lower house of the parliament. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who visited Pyongyang just last week, is said to have delivered a personal invitation from Putin to Kim, requesting his attendance at the Eastern Economic Forum held in Vladivostok every year. Now, the forum is an event that many regional players attend, with South Korean President Moon Jaein too delivering a speech there last year. And Chinese President Xi Jinping is said to be considering going, while Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also plans to join. And now to the inter-Korean affairs. The South Korean government is gearing up to implement the agreements reached during last week's high-level inter-Korean talks. Seoul's Unification Ministry plans to send its officials to the north to check on sites for establishing a joint liaison office, while the Culture Ministry is working on the agenda for inter-Korean sports cooperation. Our Oh Jung-hee with the details.
South Korea will soon send officials to check the Kaesong industrial complex, where the two Koreas have agreed to establish a joint liaison office at Friday's high-level talks. The complex is the two Koreas' joint industrial park located at the inter-Korean border. But because it's been shut down since February 2016, some pre-work needs to be done to set up offices there. Seoul's Unification Ministry says the officials will go and check the site to prepare for necessary renovations and establish a temporary liaison office first.
A joint liaison office will station officials from both Seoul and Pyongyang. It's a symbol of inter-Korean interaction taking place on the northern side of the border. We expect it to be a groundbreaking measure that leads to stable improvement of inter-Korean relations.
Meanwhile, South Korea's Culture Ministry is prepping for the inter-Korean sports talks slated for June 18th. Main talking points are forming unified teams for 2018 Asian Games to be held in Indonesia this August, as well as holding an inter-Korean basketball game. Seoul also plans to invite Pyongyang's athletes to participate in the World Shooting Championship that's to take place in South Korea late August. The ministry says it expects the two Koreas to engage more on a working level after the sports talks to discuss cultural interaction, like publishing a joint Korean language dictionary. Other than these schedules, the two Koreas have a couple more events on their way. A general-level military talks will be held on June 14th to lower tensions on the Korean peninsula, and the Red Cross talks will be held on June 22nd for arranging reunions of war-torn families. The locations of the meetings have all been determined. A joint event that Seoul and Pyongyang hope to hold on June 15th to mark 18 years of their first summit agreement in 2000 is unlikely to happen, as June is already jam-packed with schedules for both Koreas. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is reviewing the revised version of the country's minimum wage law. At a cabinet meeting this morning, Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun and the rest of the cabinet are considering whether to endorse the revised minimum wage law that was passed by Parliament a week ago. Now, this comes as labor unions have urged the president to veto the bill, calling it a change for the worse, as the revision also includes welfare benefits to be part of the new minimum wage. As it currently stands, the bill calls for certain welfare bonuses and benefits to be calculated as part of the minimum wage. And staying with that topic, the minimum wage issue has some analysts on edge. Korea's leading policy think tank suggests that if the pace of minimum wage hikes continue, it could take a heavy toll on the country's employment numbers. Our Choi Si-young with more.
The Korea Development Institute has warned that increases in the minimum wage due to take effect in 2019 and 2020 could result in job losses. The think tank projects that a 15% wage increase over the next 2 years could potentially lead to the loss of nearly 100,000 jobs in 2019 and 140,000 jobs the following year. Those increases would come on top of the Moon administration's 16% hike enacted this year, which brought the minimum wage up from about $6 an hour to $7. The institute highlighted similar difficulties in France, which stopped raising its minimum wage in 2005 once it had reached 60% of the median wage because it made it harder for low-wage earners to find employment. Korea's minimum wage in 2018 is already at 55% of the median. The report conceded that its estimates are based on the case of Hungary, where the wages were increased by 60% between 2000 and 2004. It also said it did not factor in government support for small businesses, which are usually hit hardest by higher minimum wages. The KDS report comes after the Blue House released figures that said the effects of the wage hike were 90% positive. However, the top office has come under fire for having made the calculation based on individual income rather than household income, and for excluding figures for the unemployed and self-employed. The Korea Development Institute stressed that the minimum wage increase has so far had few side effects, but it warns that the government should monitor the effects of the increases closely over the coming years. 최시영, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign exchange reserves broke a new record for the third month in a row in May. Bank of Korea says Tuesday that the total value of foreign exchange reserves reached more than $398 billion on the back of increased gains from investments in foreign assets. The reserves were up $560 million from the previous month, and South Korea had the ninth highest amount of foreign exchange reserves in the world last month. China continued to top the list with over $3 trillion in foreign exchange reserves. The first local elections under the Moon Jaein administration will be held in just 8 days from now. The race for mayor, governor, and educational superintendent jobs is mainly seen as a competition between the two biggest parties, namely the ruling Democratic Party of Korea and the main opposition Liberty Korea Party. Today, we're going to look at what's at stake for the two biggest rival political parties on June 13th. Our political correspondent Kim Min-ji with more.
The race is on for the leadership of 17 of South Korea's metropolitan cities or provinces. In the last local elections back in 2014, the New Politics Alliance for Democracy, the current ruling Democratic Party of Korea, had 9 mayors or governors elected, while the Saenuri Party, now the main opposition Liberty Korea Party, secured 8. This time around, the outcome of the local elections will be seen as a barometer of public sentiment about the Moon Jaein administration, given that it's the first nationwide election since he took office in May last year. The ruling party is trying to add to the 9 they have already, while the main opposition is out to secure at least 6 posts.
The most keenly watched areas for this year's local elections are traditional conservative strongholds like here in Gyeongsang-namdo province. Now these are the races to watch as the ruling party is riding the wave of the Moon Jaein administration's high approval rating, and there are questions whether the main opposition party will be able to survive the onslaught.
In fact, southern regions held by the Conservatives have been a focal point of the ruling party's campaign, with the party's leadership using most of their time so far supporting their candidates there. With the exception of 2 regions leaning towards the Conservative Party, some polls show Liberal candidates are in the lead. The ruling party has been calling for support from the people to get the policies of the Moon Jae-in government rolling in the Conservative-held areas.
If you pick candidates from the main opposition, it's a vote that allows and shows support for corruption. It won't be of any help to the public.
At the same time, the main opposition party is making the case that they know best how to deal with affairs of the region and asking voters to support them again. The leadership of the Conservative Party has been out on the streets nationwide, calling on people not to be blinded by polls, claiming they are inaccurate. The party says that the current government is only focusing on developments regarding North Korea, while the country's economy is in the doldrums.
Nothing is being done right here in our country while the president is doing nothing but work on Kim Jong-un. He is not thinking of reviving our economy, but focusing on boosting North Korea's economy.
But as it stands now, most experts say the environment is looking favorable for the ruling party.
The main opposition hasn't been able to build up enough trust in their party, given its relation to the impeachment of a former president. And although it's been pushing forward with issues of its own, such as reviving the economy and criticizing the government's shortcomings, it's not been able to garner public support, overshadowed by the success of the Moon administration in regards to developments with North Korea.
That said, it's going to be extra important as to how the party step up their campaigning with not so much time left.
With early voting starting on Friday and less than 10 days until Election Day, the onus is on the parties to bring out their respective voter bases, as the outcome will decide the future course of each party. For the winner, the upper hand, while for the loser, it's back to the drawing board. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Shifting focus to the first visit to Seoul by a head of state from an ASEAN member country. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte spent Monday afternoon at South Korea's presidential office with a summit with President Moon Jaein. Our Cheongwade correspondent Hwang Ho-jun with the details.
May our relations remain strong and continue to thrive for the benefit of both the Korean and Filipino people. After writing that message in the Cheongwade guest book, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and his South Korean counterpart held a summit meeting together on Monday. President Duterte is the first head of state from an ASEAN member country to visit Seoul since President Moon took office. But this was actually the second time the current presidents of South Korea and the Philippines have met. The first was on the sidelines of the ASEAN Plus 3 summit and the East Asian summit last November. In Monday's meeting, the two leaders highly evaluated the 69 years of diplomatic relations between their countries.
한국과 필리핀은 한국 전쟁을 통해 다진 굳건한 우호관계를 토대로 지난 70년간 정치, 경제, 문화, 인적 교류 등 모든 분야에서 눈부신 성과를 이루어 오고 있습니다.
President Moon noted that South Korea is the Philippines' fifth largest trading partner and that human exchanges between the two countries have risen steadily. And to further promote such partnerships, the two leaders agreed to designate 2019 a Visit South Korea-Philippines year, which will mark the 70th anniversary of the two countries establishing diplomatic ties. According to a Blue House press release, the South Korean president also expressed his gratitude for the Philippines' support for the Moon administration's efforts to peacefully resolve the North Korea nuclear issue, as well as for the recent improvements in inter-Korean relations. The two leaders pledged their commitment to the denuclearization and establishment of peace on the Korean peninsula. Also discussed during their meeting was economic cooperation between Seoul and Manila. President Duterte said that President Moon's new Southern policy, which seeks to expand South Korea's diplomatic relations and economic cooperation with ASEAN nations, will help the Philippines achieve its own economic goal. Known as the Ambisyon Natin 2040, President Duterte's own long-term policy is aimed at transforming the Philippines into a mid to high-income nation by the year 2040 by creating a trustworthy, poverty-free middle-class society. Soon after their summit, Presidents Moon and Duterte signed an MOU pledging cooperation between their two countries in areas including transportation, trade, and renewable energy, which was then followed by a joint press conference. And to honor the visiting Philippine president, a dinner banquet and cultural performances were hosted by the South Korean president. President Duterte will leave for Manila on Tuesday. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
And now for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we start in Guatemala. The country's most violent volcanic eruption in more than 100 years has killed more than 60 people. For more on this and other news around the world, we turn to our Adam at the News Center. So Adam, horrific scenes coming out of that Central American country. What's the latest we have?
Well, Sammy, the death toll from the eruption of Fuego volcano has taken a sudden jump within the space of a few hours of a second eruption on Monday. It went from 33 to now at least 65, according to Guatemala's National Institute of Forensic Science. The bodies were found in the small villages of Los Lotes and El Rodeo, and only a few of those bodies have so far been identified. Dozens more people remain missing, and it is feared the death toll could rise even further. Volcanic ash and lava have buried villages surrounding Fuego volcano, which is located about 40 kilometers southwest of the capital, Guatemala City. The lava and ash have been moving at a rapid pace, killing people who are still inside their homes. Rescuers are still trying to reach affected areas, but the harsh conditions are restricting their access. Nearly 2 million people are said to have been affected by the volcano, and about 3,000 residents are staying at temporary shelters that have been set up. Meanwhile, a 5.2 magnitude earthquake occurred near Guatemala's coast, but there are no reports of damage so far. In other news, Mexico has become the latest country to take the United States to the World Trade Organization over Washington's steel and aluminium tariffs. Mexico's economy ministry said Monday it was starting the dispute settlement process because the U.S. was violating WTO rules. Washington imposed a 25% tariff on steel imports and 10% tariff on aluminium imports from Mexico, Canada and the EU last week. Ottawa and Brussels have already filed complaints with the WTO, and all three nations have announced retaliatory measures against American goods. The EU also said it could impose preliminary measures to safeguard its steel and aluminium industries as early as next month. Meanwhile, President Trump took aim at China and Canada again in a series of tweets on Monday. He said China's taxing on American soybeans and Canada's trade barriers on agricultural products were not acceptable. Saudi Arabia has issued its first driving licenses to 10 women on Monday, just weeks before a ban on female driving is lifted. They swapped their foreign licenses with domestic ones, and about 2,000 other women are expected to do the same next week. The move came amid some doubt the kingdom would go ahead with the lifting of the ban following a government crackdown on women activists who advocated their right to drive. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been pushing for more open policies towards women to reshape Saudi Arabia's ultra-conservative image.
Good morning. Those of us in Seoul will need to brace for more summer heat under mostly sunny skies today, while southern regions will get some relief from the heat wave with between 5 and 40 millimeters of rainfall expected until the mid-afternoon. And temperatures will be 5 to 7 degrees lower today in some places, getting up to 24 degrees Celsius in Daegu and Gyeongju, and Seoul will make it to 29 degrees. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. So the summer heat wave will continue in central regions of South Korea today, while most of North Korea will have warm highs as well. Beijing is going to have the hottest day of the season on Tuesday with an expected high of 41 degrees Celsius. Sydney had a wet and a chilly start to June, but sunshine will return on Thursday. Over in Canada, Vancouver will be covered with lots of clouds with a high of 17 degrees Celsius. And as for South America, Brazil's two major cities will have a wet Tuesday. Taking you to Europe, those in Moscow will see showers in the morning followed by a partly cloudy afternoon. Lastly, to Africa, Cape Town and Addis Ababa will have unstable weather conditions. And that's the weather update for now.
And that'll do it for us at the hour on Arirang News. Thanks as always for watching, and goodbye for now.
네, 조선시대 궁중요리가 준비되어 있습니다.
오시면 바로 들 수 있으세요.